and welcome back to another session on Ways with Words. We continue with our poem. Let's begin the poem. Last video we discussed Keats, his odes, the 6 odes that he's famous for, and also we discussed the background, and we also did a short biography of Keats. Now let's get to the topic. Okay, so Ode to Autumn. Ode to Autumn is one of his later odes, and it is written, in fact it was written just a year before Keats' death. So it has in fact a lot of implications also. Now before we move on, have you seen the autumn season? Have you experienced autumn season? See, we are blessed with beautiful changing seasons, right? However, in India, it is mostly the summer and monsoons that we are very much aware of. The fall, or otherwise called the autumn season. Autumn season is also known by the name fall, F-A-L-L, the fall. So, is not very prominent in India. But yes, we do have the post-monsoon season, that is the autumn season, during October, December. Southern part of India is generally hotter than the northern parts of India. And since the climate of India comprises a wide range of weather conditions across a vast geographic scale and varied topography, making generalization is difficult. That is, generalizing it into spring, autumn, winter, or the summer, spring, summer, autumn, winter is difficult because our geographic scale and our varied topography is different, right? Or our topography is different. But in European countries, especially in England, the first day of autumn, as per the meteorological calendar, is usually September 1st, and it ends on 30th November. The seasons in England are defined as spring, which falls or which is between March, or which is the season March, April and May. Summer is during June, July, August. Autumn is September, October, November, and winter is December, January and February. That's how the seasons as per the meteorological calendar goes in England and other European countries. In England, autumn is the perfect time to explore both the countryside and the cities. It's a very beautiful time. The English countryside during autumn transforms into a riot of yellow, red and orange. It's like fire, okay? It's very beautiful to see. It's yellow, partly yellow, red and orange. Like for instance, you might have seen it in Kilikam film in Ooty when it was shot. An area where Mohanlal and Revati, Mohanlal is carrying the suitcase and he is walking along with Revati, that the leaves are falling. It's yellow and red, and it's a very beautiful place. So likewise here in England, it's much more beautiful than that. The entire forest, the color or change the color of their leaves. The fiery landscape, this beautiful fiery landscape, can be viewed all around the country and are best seen in national parks such as the lake districts. Now, lake districts, you must have heard of lake districts. The lake poets William Wordsworth, S.T. Coleridge and Robert Southey, they were called lake poets, the lake districts, where The rusty colored trees are beautifully reflected in the vast bodies of water. It is also the time of harvest. Autumn harvests are steeped in traditions. There are so many traditions. There are many towns and villages hosting their own celebrations. So that also has a lot in our poem. And also the landscape are the most beautiful, most dramatic, most romantic during this time. The autumn season mean misty mornings, grey clouds and crisp afternoons. So it's a beautiful time to walk. And Keats wrote this beautiful poem because he was greatly influenced by autumn. Now, however, if you look at the autumn season in Keats, the first stanza of the poem begins as a tribute, or begins with as invoking to the goddess of autumn, or speaking high of it's a celebration of autumn. But as we move on, we understand that he is speaking about something else also, because autumn is also a time associated with decay. The falling leaves, they are falling, right? The leaves are falling. So what do you mean by the leaves fall? Why do they turn yellow? They turn yellow when they are approaching the end of their life. The end, or the cycle, is about to end. So they fall, right? So the falling leaves are associated with what? Death. And also a time where life is going to end. So just bear that in mind. So right now, and we'll pick it up as we move on. So just bear that alone in mind, that it is also speaking about decay and death. Autumn season also refers a reference to decay and death. It is also, it's tricky to talk about Keats, the poet, without mentioning another poet, and that is Thomas Chatterton. Now, here I'm going to give you an assignment. It's for your first internals. I want everybody, BCom, BBA and BA students, to write an assignment on Thomas Chatterton. I'm not going to give you anything else. I'm only going to give you certain details that will help you to find the right person. Who was Thomas Chatterton? And that you have to write in about his various poems. In fact, he can be considered as one of the first romantic poets. He was just 17 when he died. He died at a very young age. He took his own life. He suicided. So these are the important things that I would, or about him, so that will help you find the right person. So Thomas Chatterton, I want you to write an assignment. It has to be neatly typed. I don't want written work. I presume you have already watched Clemence's video on technology, how to convert your Word document into PDF and all that. If not, watch it again. And I want you to send it to me via mail. That my mail address I shall give it, post it in your WhatsApp classroom, in the podcast, in the BBA, BA, BCom general podcast. I shall send the mail ID, and I want all of you to send it to me. And say, I'll give you only 1 week's time. The moment you watch this video, after that you can take 1 week and you should be sending the video to me. Yes. So let's come back. So it is very tricky to talk about Keats without mentioning Thomas Chatterton, who had the kind of tragic story that Keats would have identified with. Keats' life was also very tragic. Chatterton, who was born who was thought of as the first of romantic poets, and who is widely regarded as someone who embodied the romantic ideals of youth, imagination, and potentiality rather than actuality. In other words, he had the potential to achieve so much more, but his short life did not allow him to do that. He was full of potential. He was full of energy. But he was melancholy driven, and his short life did not allow him to achieve that. Keats himself made a connection between the poem To Autumn and the poet Thomas Chatterton in a letter he wrote after an evening walk he made near Winchester. Keats, when he had gone for a walk near Winchester, he himself made a connection with the poem To Autumn and the poet Thomas Chatterton. He wrote, let me quote Keats' words in the letter, quote, "How beautiful the season is now, how fine the air. I never liked stubble fields as much as now. Aye, better than the chilly green of spring. Somehow a stubble plain looks warm. This struck me so much in my Sunday walk that I composed upon it. I have been at different times so happy as not to know what weather it was. I always somehow associate Chatterton with autumn. He is the purest writer in the English language," unquote. So this was what he wrote about Chatterton in a letter to his friend after he made a walk near Winchester. Keats' letter to a friend about Chatterton, and there he associates the poem To Autumn with the poet Thomas Chatterton. Now the story associated with Chatterton is that while walking some churchyard, there is a story. I'm going to tell you a small story about Chatterton. Okay, he was walking along a churchyard, Chatterton and his friend, a friend of his. Okay, and they were walking, and Chatterton was totally absorbed in thoughts, and he did not notice an open grave in front of him. ഒരു ചേർച്ച് യാർഡിൽ കൂടി ഇങ്ങനെ നടന്നു പോവുകയാണ് ചാറ്റർട്ടൺ ഇങ്ങനെ നടന്നു പോകുമ്പോൾ കൂടെ ഒരു കൂട്ടുകാരനും കൂടെ ഉണ്ട്. അവിടെ Chatterton was very much lost in thoughts. He was thinking about something, and he did not see an open grave. ഒരു കുഴി അവിടെ കണ്ടില്ല. അത് കുഴിയാണ്, ശവക്കുഴിയാണ്. അത് തുറന്നിരിക്കുകയാണ്. It was dug. Maybe somebody died and they were going to, they were digging the grave to bury the dead body. Anyway, it was a newly dug grave. Okay, and Chatterton did not see that because he was lost in thought. And what happened was, the person he did not notice this grave and he fell into it. അതിലോട്ടങ്ങ് വീണുപോയി ആ കുഴിയിലോട്ട്. The person, that is his friend who was with him, helped him to get up, and he joked, ഒരു തമാശയ്ക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു, that he was happy to assist the resurrection of a genius like Jesus Christ. He has fallen into the grave, and ഒരു തമാശയ്ക്ക് പറഞ്ഞതാണ്, ഇങ്ങനെ കൈ പിടിച്ച് പൊക്കി എടുത്തപ്പോഴത്തേക്കും റിസറക്റ്റ് ചെയ്ത്, അതായത് ഹാപ്പി ടു അസിസ്റ്റ് ദ റിസറക്ഷൻ ഓഫ് എ ജീനിയസ് എന്ന് തമാശയ്ക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു. Chatterton replied, "My dear friend, I have been at war with grave some time now." Chatterton's reply അതായിരുന്നു, I have been at war with grave some time now, meaning he has been fighting death. So indirectly he was suggesting his melancholy, indirectly he was suggesting his depression. Later, that is 3 days later, it so happened that Chatterton killed himself. He was suffering from depression. In August 1770, he went to his attic room in Brook Street and he tore the poetry and poems he wrote into fragments before he drank arsenic. He was only 17 years old. For Keats, Chatterton was the emblem of the outcast poet, crushed by neglect and suffering youth. So when Keats associates Chatterton with autumn, he is talking about how the season can correctly represent both fulfillment and also finality. The abundance blended with the certainty of decline and loss. So it is autumn season. What Keats is talking about is all about fulfillment, and at the same time it is all about finality or the end. It is about abundance. It is also about decline, decay and loss. It is also viewed that this poem was the last poem Keats wrote. He was in a financial crisis. A year after writing this poem, he died in Rome. Now let's start the poem. So I'll just read out the first stanza of the poem. We'll go slowly. Season of mist and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the most cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the ground and plumb the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more, and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, and for summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. So, now just read the poem once again. Season of mist and mellow fruitfulness. So Keats is a poem of senses, and the pastoral or the countryside scene of To Autumn is full of sensual images. The season of autumn is associated in literature anyway with life coming to an end. But in the first stanza, Keats paints a picture of nature in its prime. Right? The season of autumn is normally associated with decay. It's the end. It's when the fruits are ripened. When fruits ripen, what do? You pluck it. That's the end of the fruit. Right? So it is always associated with, in literature it's always associated with death. It is associated with the end. The end. But in the first stanza, see how Keats paints a picture of nature. The picture of nature that he paints nature in its peak, in its prime. Look at the time that he speaks of. The time is the season of mist. Right? What is the season of mist? The season of mist, as I told you, is autumn season. The landscapes are most dramatic during this time. The autumn season means misty mornings and grey clouds and crisp afternoons. So season of mist is a reference to autumn. And what is the climate here? And how does the climate, look at the climate. The climate is that of the maturing sun. The maturing sun, the setting sun, the maturing sun. Soon it's going to be cold, and soon after autumn you have the winter. That's also a reference to it. The maturing sun. And what are they doing? The maturing sun are working together. That is the season of mist and mellow fruitfulness. That season are the close bosom friend of the maturing sun. They are two close friends, and they are conspiring with how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run. So what are they doing? They are like two friends, close friends, working together, conspiring, working together. They are working together. So the time and the climate. The time is the season, the climate, the maturing sun. Okay, the time and the season, they are working together, conspiring together like two close friends, bosom friends. It is pronounced bosom, not bosom. Okay, bosom friends, they are working together to bring nature to a peak of abundance, of maturity and ripeness. So they are working together, both the time and climate. The sun, the season, autumn season, and the sun are there, the climate. They are working together to bring the peak, or to bring autumn at its peak. And there will be a lot of abundance, of maturity, of ripeness. In this stanza, Keats lists 4 things which this season has achieved, like to load and bless the vines with fruit, to make trees bend with ripe apples, to make large fruits and small nuts swell with plump goodness, to make more and more buds so that there are more and more flowers. For whom? For the bees. So if you look at the word, now look at the poem. With fruits that vines that round the thatched eave runs, to bend with apples the most cottage trees. So to load the vines, what are the vines here? A reference to the climbers. It could be any climbers. It could be any climbers, it could be the vines, the grapevines, it could be a reference to the fruits and vegetables. So to load and bless the vines with what? With fruits. That is the first one. And the second one is to make trees, to bend with apples the most cottage trees. So to make trees bend with what? Bend with ripe apples. And thirdly, to make large fruit, with fruit to bend, to fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to make large fruit, and also the small nuts to swell the gourd and plumb the hazelnuts. So what is this gourd here? Gourd is a reference to they belong to the pumpkin family. It is a reference to pumpkins or cucumbers, a kind of vegetable. So there are 4 things that this season is going to achieve. And what are the 4 things? To load and bless the vines with fruit, to make the trees bend with ripe apples, to make large fruits and small nuts swell with plump goodness, hazelnuts that you have in Nutella, the hazelnuts. And also to make more and more buds so that there are more and more flowers for the bees. So these 4 things are the ones that you have to bear in mind in the first stanza. These are the 4 things that the autumn season and the maturing sun are conspiring to bring on in this season. So if we are to take them one at a time, grapevines which are now loaded with fruit. Notice how nature is full of life and energy as it runs around the thatched eaves. Thatch, what is thatch? Thatch is reeds or some other plants that are used as roof covering in England. Thatched houses, right? You can still find lots of such cottages in UK today with thatched roof. It is a traditional way of roofing houses with, with reeds or other plants. നമ്മളിവിടെ ഓല മെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള വീടുകളാണ്, ഓല കൊണ്ട് മെടഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ളത്. അതേപോലെ തന്നെ ഈ റീഡ് പോലത്തെ കുറേ വള്ളിച്ചെടികൾ പോലത്തെ ഒരു സാധനമാണ്. അങ്ങനെ ആ റീഡും അങ്ങനത്തെ പ്ലാന്റ്സൊക്കെ ഉപയോഗിച്ച് റൂഫ് ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു സിസ്റ്റത്തിനെയാണ് thatched എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. സോ ഇൻ UK you will find cottages which are thatched even today. Okay, so Eve, what is Eve? Eve could be, now Keats does not speak much about it, but Keats could have meant two things. One is Eve can also mean a short word for evening. Probably the poet did not mean evening as such, because thatch eve runs എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് can mean both. It can also refer to the how beautiful it would be looking under the evening sun. It can also mean eave, which is the overhanging part of the roof. താഴെ ഉള്ള റൂഫിൻ്റെ താഴത്തെ overhanging പാർട്ടിനെയും eve എന്നാണ് പറയുക. So the vines are curling around the lower ends of the roof. ഇങ്ങനെ വള്ളി ഇങ്ങനെ ചുറ്റി ആ റൂഫിൻ്റെ മുകളിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ ചുറ്റി ഇങ്ങനെ കിടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. നല്ല ഭംഗിയാണ് അത് കാണാൻ. They are climbing against the house's walls. So Eve suggests the bottom of a thatched roof. So next in line is are the apples. So next are the apples on the fruit trees, which are very heavy with ripeness. And because they are heavy, they are ready to be plucked, and they cause the branch to bend and they are ready to drop. അല്ലേ, അതേപോലെയാണ് നിൽക്കുന്നത്. ആപ്പിൾ എല്ലാം റൈപ്പായിട്ടുണ്ട്, അത് പറിക്കാറായിട്ടുണ്ട്. അതിൻ്റെ ഹെവിനെസ് കാരണമാണ് ഈ the branch of the apple tree, it is heavy and it is bending. Okay, so the word bend says it all. Bend means not straight. So you may notice how this line and the next few lines, there are a number of words that express that the fruits are heavy. The fruits are full of, they are ripe and they are heavy. The apples are ripe and are ready to be plucked, and they bend, and they bend the branches of the trees that they are growing on. Okay, and the next lines, that is the gods, I told you the gods, they swell up like balloons. These gods the cucumber belong to this god family. Likewise pumpkin and also melons, watermelons, all they are a part of this god family. These are kind of vegetables, and they are the season is making them swell. They are full of full of fruit. They are also ripening. So വലിയ cucumber, വലിയ pumpkin, വലിയ watermelons, they are becoming big because of this season. And also he also speaks about the nuts, the hazelnuts that are almost ripe. That those nuts also, hazelnuts, which it's a type of nut that is there in the Nutella. Nutella is made up of this hazelnuts. Okay, so what does it do to the nuts? They are these smaller nuts, the ones with nuts, they have been fattened. They are also being fattened. The small, so it's not just the bigger ones, the bigger vegetables, but also the smaller nuts are also being fattened by autumn season. Finally, we see the result of early autumn on the flowers, whose abundance is shown in clever structural device, where more is emphasized by the next line, and still more, that's how he says, and still more, or which creates the sense of overflowering abundance. So we find that it is an early autumn, and there is a lot of flowers blooming at the same time. Buds and buds are everywhere, and still more, that shows the sense of overflowering abundance. So budding means growing or expanding, or the flowers blooming all around. And these flowers, what do? They attract the bees. And at the end of the stanza, we see the clammy cells. Now what are these clammy cells? These are the honeycombs made by the bees. Bees in the honeycombs are, okay, that comb, that hexagonal shaped combs, honeycombs made by the bees. They are over brimming. So what is inside these honeycombs? They are over brimming with sweet sticky honey. So the previous season of summer is also mentioned, which reminds us that this is very early autumn. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് സമ്മർ സീസൺ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ള, സ്പ്രിംഗ് കഴിഞ്ഞു, സമ്മർ കഴിഞ്ഞ് ഉടൻ ഉള്ള ഒരു സീസണാണ് എന്താണ്, മെച്യൂറിങ്സ് ആണെന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. അപ്പോൾ they are talking about, or the Keats is talking about early autumn, where still you will find bees, where still you will find the flowers all blooming. So altogether we have a perfect nature, which introduces the first subtle note of caution in this poem. So there is also a warning in this poem, a caution in this poem. And this is created by what? There are no words which creates this caution. അവിടെ കീറ്റ്സ് ഒരു വാക്കും, ഒരു കോഷ്യസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള വാക്കല്ല അവിടെ തന്നിട്ടുള്ളത്. ഒരു വാക്കും നമുക്ക് അവിടെ കാണാൻ പറ്റില്ല. ഈ വാർണിങ്ങിൻ്റെയോ കോഷൻ്റെയോ വാക്കൊന്നും തന്നെ അവിടെ കാണുന്നില്ല. പക്ഷേ how does he create this caution? This caution is created by the imagined overconfidence of the bees enjoying the budding flowers. These flowers attracts the bees. There are so much of flowers until they think the warm days will never cease, and still more later flowers for the bees, until who thinks? The bees think that the warm days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their clammy walls. So they feel overconfident with the oversupply of flowers, that the bees, they feel that the warm days will never cease, the summer will never go away, and that the winter will never approach. They feel like that, but they will. That is the truth. That they feel, the bees feel that this summer is eternal, but that's not true. It will cease, it will end, because in this poem we need to connect a season over imbued with energy and life and potential with the human life cut short. With the human life cut short, I'm speaking about Thomas Chatterton, and I'm also speaking about Keats's own life. All throughout the stanza we have this caution of bringing in nature, oversupply of nature, the early autumn where summer has just ended and everything is ripe, ready to be harvested, and the bees are swarming around their clammy walls, which is filled with honey, which is filled with sticky sweet honey, and they are overconfident that this season will never end, but it will definitely end. So here we have a reference to the life, the energy of life, the potential of life, with what? With human life that is cut short. So we'll stop here and we'll take up the next stanza in the next class. So thank you and keep safe.